What happens when a legendary Comanche warrior, his two young sons, and a beautiful countrywoman are brought together in a chance encounter that no one expected? The choices made in that moment could change everything. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. It was the summer of 1857 in the vast plains of Texas. The scorching sun hung high in the cloudless sky as Dakota, a respected Comanche warrior, rode alongside his two young sons, Nahele and Keme, aged 7 and 5. Their horses moved steadily through the tall prairie grass, heading toward the small frontier town of Willow Creek. Dakota's reputation among the Comanche tribe was legendary. His name, meaning friend to all, was ironically at odds with how settlers viewed him, as a fierce warrior who had defended his people's territories with unwavering courage. But the changing times had forced him to reconsider his path. After losing his wife to smallpox 2 years prior, Dakota had been raising his sons alone, trying to navigate a world increasingly hostile to their way of life. "Father, why must we go to the white man's town?" asked Nahele, his dark eyes curious yet wary. Dakota adjusted the leather reins in his hands. "We need supplies, my son, and it is important for you both to understand the world that surrounds us. The future will be different from what I knew as a child. Will they be afraid of us?" Keme's small voice carried on the wind. Dakota smiled gently at his younger son. "Perhaps, but fear comes from not knowing. Today, we will be just travelers passing through." As they approached Willow Creek, Dakota instructed his sons to stay close. He had traded with settlers before and knew enough English to get by. Today, he wore simpler clothing than his traditional Comanche attire, a concession to practicality and safety. The town was bustling with activity. Wooden storefronts lined the main street, and horses were hitched outside the general store. People moved about their business, casting occasional glances at the Native American family. "Remember, we are here to trade and observe," Dakota reminded his sons as they dismounted. Inside the general store, the proprietor, Mr. Jenkins, regarded them with cautious eyes, but nodded in acknowledgement. Dakota had been here before, and though not welcomed warmly, his pelts and tradecraft were respected. While examining supplies, the bell above the door jingled, and a young woman entered. Her auburn hair was tied back in a practical braid, but wisps had escaped to frame her face. Her simple dress couldn't hide her natural beauty, and her presence seemed to brighten the dusty store. "Good morning, Mr. Jenkins," she called cheerfully. "I've brought those preserves my mother promised." "Much obliged, Miss Clara," the shopkeeper replied. "Your mother's preserves are the best in the county." Clara Wilson was 23 and had lived her entire life on her family's small farm outside town. She noticed Dakota and his sons immediately, but unlike others who averted their eyes, she smiled directly at them. Keme, usually shy, smiled back. "Hello there, young man," she said, bending slightly to meet his eye level. "That's a fine feather you have." Keme touched the eagle feather his father had given him, pride swelling in his chest. "My father says it will help me grow brave," he replied in careful English. Clara looked up at Dakota, her green eyes meeting his dark ones. "You have taught him English very well. We learn what we must to survive," Dakota replied, his voice deep and measured. Clara nodded, understanding more than his words conveyed. "I'm Clara Wilson. My family's farm is east of town. I am Dakota. These are my sons, Nahele and Keme." Their conversation was interrupted by another customer muttering disapprovingly. Clara straightened, her expression hardening slightly. "Mr. Jenkins, I'll need some flour and sugar as well." As she gathered her supplies, Clara kept glancing toward Dakota and his sons. There was something about the dignity with which he carried himself, the gentle way he guided his children, that contrasted sharply with the stories she'd heard about savage Comanche warriors. Before leaving, Clara approached them again. "There's a small gathering at our farm tomorrow, just neighbors sharing a meal after the barn raising. If you're still in the area." She hesitated. "You and your boys would be welcome." Dakota was surprised by the invitation. Such gestures were rare from settlers. "Why would you invite strangers to your home?" Clara's smile was genuine. "Because sometimes strangers become friends, and my father always says we could use more of those out here." She scribbled directions on a piece of paper and handed it to him. "Midday, if you decide to come." After she left, Nahele looked up at his father. "Will we go?" Dakota carefully folded the paper and tucked it inside his shirt. "Perhaps. We shall see what tomorrow brings." That night, camping under the stars outside town, Dakota considered Clara's invitation. It could be a trap. There were still bounties for Comanche scalps in some territories. But something in her eyes had seemed truthful, and his sons needed to learn about the changing world around them. "Father," Nahele said as they sat by the fire, "tell us again about Mother." Dakota's heart tightened. "Your mother was as beautiful as the morning star, and as fierce as a mountain lion protecting her cubs. She would be proud of you both." "Would she want us to go tomorrow?" Kemi asked sleepily. Dakota stroked his son's hair. "She would want us to be brave in finding our path forward." As his sons drifted to sleep, Dakota gazed at the stars, feeling both the weight of his people's suffering and the responsibility for his son's future. Tomorrow would be a step into unknown territory, more dangerous perhaps than any battle he had faced. The following day dawned clear and promising. Dakota woke before his sons, performing his morning prayers as the first light crept across the eastern horizon. He had decided during the night that they would attend the gathering at the Wilson farm, not out of trust for the settlers, but because his sons needed to understand both worlds they inhabited. "Are we really going to the white woman's home?" Nahele asked as they packed their small camp. "Yes," Dakota replied. "But remember, we go as observers. Keep your eyes open and your spirits guarded." They rode eastward, following Clara's directions. Dakota had dressed them all in their least distinctive clothing. Though proud of his heritage, he knew that sometimes survival meant not drawing attention to their differences. The Wilson farm came into view around midday, a modest homestead with a newly constructed barn, fields of corn stretching behind it, and a small orchard to one side. Several wagons and horses indicated that guests had already arrived. Dakota hesitated at the property's edge, studying the scene. Men and women chatted amiably while children chased each other around hay bales. No weapons were visibly displayed, which was a promising sign. "Remember what I told you," he said to his sons. "Stay close." As they approached, heads turned in their direction. Conversations faltered and the atmosphere tightened like a bowstring. Dakota kept his face impassive, though his hand instinctively moved closer to the knife hidden at his waist. Then Clara emerged from the crowd, her face brightening. "You came." She wore a simple blue dress today, her hair loose around her shoulders. "I'm so glad. Please join us." She led them through the gathering, introducing them simply as Dakota and his sons who are visiting the area. Some people nodded stiffly, others barely acknowledged them. Clara's father, a weathered man with kind eyes, extended his hand to Dakota. "James Wilson, welcome to our home." Dakota shook his hand, noting the strength in it. "Thank you for allowing us to join your celebration." "Any friend of Clara's is welcome here," James replied, though Dakota detected a hint of reservation in his tone. Clara showed them to the food tables. "Please, help yourselves. My mother's fried chicken is renowned throughout the county." Kemi looked up at his father questioningly. Dakota nodded, and both boys accepted plates from Clara. The food was unfamiliar but abundant: fried chicken, cornbread, potato salad, and apple pie. As they ate, standing slightly apart from the others, Clara joined them again. "How do you find the food?" "It is very different from our cooking," Dakota admitted. "But good. What do you usually eat?" she asked, genuinely interested. "Buffalo, deer, wild plants. We cook simply over fire." A young man approached, eyeing Dakota suspiciously. "Clara, your father needs help with the cider." "Thank you, Thomas. I'll be right there." As Thomas lingered, Clara added firmly, "I'm having a conversation." After Thomas reluctantly left, Clara sighed. "I apologize. Not everyone here is as open-minded as they should be." "Your kindness is unexpected," Dakota said quietly. "Why show such courtesy to a Comanche warrior?" Clara looked surprised. "Is that what you are? I simply see a father with his sons." She paused. "Though I suspected you weren't just any traveler. There's a dignity in how you carry yourself." Dakota studied her face, searching for deception but finding none. Most settlers fear the Comanche. Fear comes from stories, not from knowing people, she replied. My mother taught me to judge each person by their actions, not by tales told around fires. Their conversation was interrupted by shouts of alarm. One of the farmhands came running. Wolf! There's a wolf near the chicken coop! The men grabbed rifles and pitchforks, hurrying toward the commotion. Clara looked concerned. The children were playing back there. Dakota handed his plate to Nahele. Stay here with your brother, he instructed, then turned to Clara. I will help. He moved swiftly through the crowd, following the men to the back of the property. There, cornered against the chicken coop, was not a wolf but a young coyote, frightened and snarling. Several children had been playing nearby and were now being hurried away by their mothers. Thomas aimed his rifle at the animal. Stand back. Wait, Dakota called, stepping forward. It is just a young coyote, scared and hungry. It'll kill our chickens, one of the farmers protested. And what threat is it to armed men? Dakota countered. He approached slowly, speaking in his native tongue, soft, calming words that seemed to resonate with the frightened animal. The coyote's eyes fixed on Dakota, its snarling subsiding slightly. With careful movements, Dakota removed his belt and fashioned it into a makeshift lasso. In one fluid motion, he captured the coyote, quickly binding its muzzle before it could bite. I will take it far from your farm and release it, he told the astonished farmers. It is young and has simply lost its way. Clara watched from the edge of the group, her expression filled with admiration. That was remarkable, she said as Dakota carried the subdued coyote past her. How did you know it would respond to you? All creatures respond to respect, he answered. I will return shortly. Dakota rode out with the coyote, releasing it several miles from the farm in a wooded area where it could hunt safely away from settlements. When he returned, he found the gathering had resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted. Some of the settlers now regarded him with cautious respect, while others seemed even more suspicious. His sons were sitting with Clara under an oak tree, and she was showing them how to whittle simple shapes from wood. Your father is very brave, Clara was saying as Dakota approached. He is the strongest warrior in our tribe, Nahele stated proudly. He has counted coup many times. Clara looked up at Dakota as he joined them. Your son has been telling me about your people's customs. It's fascinating. Nahele, Dakota said in their language. Some stories are for our people only. But she asked about the eagle feathers. Nahele protested. Clara stood, brushing off her skirt. I'm sorry if I pried. I'm just curious about your ways. She hesitated. Would you and your sons join us for supper? My parents have invited you to stay. Dakota glanced at the sky, noting the position of the sun. We should begin our journey back. It's a long ride to town, Clara persisted. At least rest your horses a while longer. Against his better judgment, Dakota agreed. As the afternoon wore on, he found himself increasingly drawn into conversation with Clara, who asked thoughtful questions about his people's traditions, never prying but showing genuine interest. By the time they finally departed, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the plains. Clara walked them to their horses. Will you return to town tomorrow? She asked, a hopeful note in her voice. We have trading to finish, Dakota acknowledged. Then we must return to our people. Clara nodded, understanding in her eyes. Then perhaps I'll see you in town. I often help at the mercantile on Thursdays. As they rode away, Keme asked, Father, is Miss Clara your friend now? Dakota considered the question seriously. Perhaps, but friendship between our people and settlers is as delicate as spider silk. I like her, Kem declared simply. She doesn't look at us like the others do. Dakota remained silent, troubled by his own growing admiration for the young woman. Such feelings could only lead to complications in a world where their peoples remained deeply divided. Thursday arrived with an unexpected rainstorm that transformed the dusty roads into muddy tracks. Dakota and his sons took shelter in a small cave outside of town, waiting for the downpour to subside before venturing into Willow Creek to complete their trading. Will we see Miss Clara today? Kimi asked, watching raindrops cascade from the cave's entrance. Perhaps, Dakota replied, trying to keep his voice neutral despite the flutter of anticipation he felt at the thought. But our purpose is trade, not socializing. Nahele, more perceptive than his years suggested, glanced knowingly at his father. You speak differently when you talk to her. How so? Dakota asked, surprised by his son's observation. Your voice becomes softer, Nahali explained, like when you used to talk to Mother. Dakota turned away, busying himself with their supplies. His eldest son's words had struck uncomfortably close to truth. Clara Wilson had awakened feelings he'd believed long buried with his wife. It was foolish, dangerous even, to entertain such thoughts about a settler woman. By midday, the rain had lessened to a drizzle. They mounted their horses and continued toward town, the animals' hooves splashing through puddles along the muddy path. Willow Creek appeared subdued under the gray sky, with fewer people on the streets than usual. At the general store, Mr. Jenkins greeted them with slightly less suspicion than before. News of Dakota's handling of the coyote had apparently reached town. Dakota presented the remaining furs and handcrafted items he'd brought to trade, negotiating carefully for ammunition, salt, coffee, and cloth. The bell above the door jingled, and Dakota didn't need to turn to know who had entered. Something in the air seemed to change, a subtle shift that he'd become attuned to in Clara's presence. "Good afternoon," she called, shaking raindrops from her shawl. Her cheeks were flushed from the cool air, her hair damp at the edges. "Miss Clara," Mr. Jenkins nodded. "Nasty weather we're having." "Indeed, though the crops will appreciate it." She smiled warmly at Dakota and his sons. "I'm glad to see you made it to town safely." Keme ran to her, propriety forgotten. "Miss Clara, Father said we might see you today." Clara laughed, tousling the boy's hair. "Did he now? And what else did your father say?" Keme opened his mouth to reply, but Dakota quickly interrupted. "We are finishing our trading. We will depart when the weather clears." Something like disappointment flickered across Clara's face. "So soon. I thought perhaps—" She hesitated. "My father has some broken tools that need mending. I remember you mentioned you're skilled with metalwork. Perhaps you could help for fair payment, of course." Dakota recognized the thinly veiled excuse for what it was, but found himself unable to refuse. "I could examine them." "Wonderful." Clara's smile returned. "Father's at our wagon near the blacksmith's shop. The rain drove him to take shelter there." As they walked through town together, Dakota was acutely aware of the stares they attracted. A Comanche warrior walking alongside a young settler woman, with 2 native children between them. It was a sight that challenged the established order of frontier life. "People are watching us," he noted quietly. "Let them watch," Clara replied with surprising defiance. "Perhaps they'll learn something." At the blacksmith's, James Wilson was deep in conversation with the smith, but straightened when he saw them approach. His expression was guarded but not hostile. "Clara mentioned you might be willing to look at some tools," he said to Dakota. "I've got a few implements that need a skilled hand." The broken tools turned out to be minimal repairs that the blacksmith could easily have handled, confirming Dakota's suspicion that this was merely a pretext. Nevertheless, he set to work, demonstrating the metalworking techniques his people had developed, combining traditional methods with skills learned from Mexican traders. As he worked, Clara engaged his sons in conversation, teaching them a simple string game that had them laughing despite their initial shyness. Watching them together, Dakota felt an ache of longing for what could never be. A normal life. A family complete again. "You have a gift with metal," James observed as Dakota finished repairing a damaged hoe blade. "Where did you learn such skills?" "My father taught me, as his father taught him," Dakota replied. "We Comanche were not always warriors. Before the horses came, we were hunters and craftsmen." James nodded thoughtfully. "War changes all men, regardless of their skin." This simple acknowledgement of shared humanity surprised Dakota. "You fought?" "Mexican War," James confirmed. "Saw enough blood to last a lifetime." He glanced at Clara, lowering his voice. "My daughter sees the world as it should be, not as it is. She has her mother's heart." "It is a good heart," Dakota said before he could stop himself. James gave him a long, measuring look. "Yes, too good sometimes for her own safety." The warning in his words was unmistakable. Their conversation was interrupted by shouts from the street. A group of mounted men had ridden into town, their horses splashing mud as they came to a halt outside the saloon. Dakota recognized their leader immediately, Captain Harland of the Texas Rangers. a man known for his brutal campaigns against the Comanche. "We should go," Dakota said urgently, gathering his sons. "Those men are dangerous for us." Clara looked alarmed. "The Rangers? But surely they wouldn't—" "They would," James interrupted grimly. "Dakota's right. You should leave now while they're occupied with their drinking." "The back way," Clara insisted, leading them through the blacksmith's yard to a narrow alley. "This will take you to the edge of town without being seen from the main street." As they prepared to part, Clara impulsively reached for Dakota's hand. "When will you return to Willow Creek?" The touch of her fingers sent warmth through his arm despite the cool rain. "It is not safe for us here," he said honestly. "Captain Harland has hunted my people for years." "But you can't just disappear," Clara protested, her eyes searching his. "Nahele and Kame were I was beginning to—" She stopped, seemingly unable to finish her thought. Dakota gently withdrew his hand. "Some paths cannot cross for long without danger, Clara Wilson." "Then meet me," she whispered urgently. "Tomorrow, at the old oak by Beaver Creek. Do you know it?" He did. A massive tree that stood alone on a small rise, visible for miles across the plains. "It would not be wise." "Please," she insisted, "just to say a proper goodbye. Bring your sons. I'll bring food for a picnic, noon tomorrow." Against all better judgment, Dakota nodded. "If it is safe, we will come." They parted quickly after that, Dakota and his sons slipping out of town unnoticed while the Rangers remained occupied at the saloon. That night, camping in a hidden ravine, Dakota struggled with his decision. Meeting Clara again was foolish, potentially dangerous. Yet the thought of never seeing her again caused a pain he hadn't expected. "Father," Nahele said as they sat by their small fire, "are we in danger?" Dakota considered how much to tell his son. "The world is changing, Nahele. Our people face difficult times ahead, but I will always protect you and your brother." "Is Miss Clara in danger too?" Kime asked sleepily. "No," Dakota assured him, though he wasn't entirely certain. Associating with Comanche, even peacefully, could damage her reputation in the settlement. But our worlds are very different. As his sons drifted to sleep, Dakota remained awake, watching the stars appear as the clouds cleared. Tomorrow would require all his warriors' caution. But something stronger than caution was drawing him to that meeting, something he had thought he would never feel again. Morning broke clear after the rain, the sun transforming the wet landscape into a glistening tapestry of greens and golds. Dakota rose early, scanning the horizon with practiced eyes for any sign of danger before waking his sons. "Are we going to see Miss Clara today?" Keme asked eagerly as they broke camp. "Yes," Dakota replied, "but we must be cautious. The Rangers may still be in the area." They rode carefully, taking indirect paths and stopping frequently for Dakota to survey their surroundings. The great oak at Beaver Creek stood in solitary majesty on its small hill, its massive branches spreading in welcome against the blue sky. As they approached, Dakota felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. Clara was already there, a small figure beneath the tree's expansive shade. She had spread a blanket on the ground and was unpacking a basket. No one else appeared to be with her. "Miss Clara," Kime called out, waving enthusiastically. She looked up, her face brightening. "You came. I was beginning to worry." Dakota dismounted, helping his sons down from their horses. "We took a careful path," he explained, his eyes automatically scanning the surrounding countryside once more. "The Rangers, they left town at dawn," Clara assured him. "Headed north, following reports of a raiding party." Relief and something else, disappointment perhaps, warred within him. The danger that had given him reason for caution was gone, yet so was his excuse to end this unusual friendship before it deepened further. Clara had prepared a generous picnic, fried chicken, biscuits, apple tarts, and a jar of sweet tea. The boys fell upon the food with enthusiasm, their initial reserve forgotten in childhood hunger. "I brought something for them," Clara said, reaching into her basket to produce 2 small wooden toys, intricately carved horses with articulated legs. "I thought they might like these." The boys accepted the gifts with wide eyes, immediately engaged in imaginary play that involved the wooden horses galloping across the blanket. "You are kind to them," Dakota observed, watching his son's happiness. Clara sat beside him, carefully maintaining a proper distance yet close enough that he could detect the faint scent of lavender. "They're wonderful children. You've raised them well, especially without their mother." "It has not been easy," he admitted. "Our tribe helps, but they need a woman's guidance." "And you?" she asked softly. "What do you need, Dakota?" The directness of her question startled him. Among his people, such matters were approached with more circumspection, especially between unmarried men and women. Yet there was something refreshing in Clara's forthright manner. "I need to ensure my sons have a future," he replied carefully. "Our way of life is threatened. The buffalo grow scarce, the treaties are broken, more settlers arrive each season." "That's not what I asked," Clara persisted gently. "What do you need for yourself?" Dakota looked away, across the rolling plains that had once been the undisputed domain of his people. "What I need is not possible in this world." Clara's hand moved slightly closer to his on the blanket. "Perhaps the world is changing in ways we don't yet understand." Before he could respond, Nahele called out, "Father, look!" pointing toward the east. Dust clouds rose on the horizon, riders approaching at speed. Dakota was on his feet instantly, his hand reaching for the knife at his belt. "Get the boys," he instructed Clara sharply. "Into the trees by the creek, quickly." Clara gathered the children without question, hurrying them toward the line of cottonwoods that marked the creek bed. Dakota moved to his horse, pulling his old rifle from its scabbard. "What is it?" Clara called back. "Rangers, perhaps, or settlers." Either possibility meant danger. "Stay hidden." The riders were closing fast. 6 men he could now see, their horses lathered with exertion. As they drew nearer, Dakota recognized Captain Harlan's distinctive hat. The Rangers had not gone north after all, or had circled back for some reason. Dakota had only moments to decide. He could flee, possibly escape, but that would leave Clara alone to face the Rangers' questions. Or he could stand his ground, risking capture or worse. He made his choice quickly, moving to stand beneath the oak, his rifle held non-threateningly across his body. He would not appear to be hiding, nor would he present himself as an immediate threat. The Rangers thundered up the small rise, reining their horses to a hard stop when they spotted him. Dust billowed around them as Harlan dismounted, his hand resting on his pistol. "Well now, what have we here?" the Ranger captain drawled. "A lone Comanche, far from his hunting grounds." "I am traveling peacefully," Dakota responded evenly. "I have broken no laws." Harlan's weathered face twisted in a cruel smile. "That's for me to determine, Indian." His eyes fell on the picnic blanket, the remnants of the meal. "Doesn't look like you're alone. Where are your companions?" Before Dakota could answer, Clara emerged from the trees, walking steadily toward them. She had left the children hidden, Dakota noted with relief. "He's with me, Captain Harlan," she announced, her voice surprisingly strong. "Mr. Dakota has been helping my father with repairs to our farm equipment." Harlan looked between them, disbelief and something uglier darkening his features. "Miss Wilson, your father know you're out here alone with a Comanche warrior?" "I'm hardly alone," she countered. "We're in open country in broad daylight having a simple meal." She gestured around, hardly the behavior of people with something to hide. One of the other Rangers spoke up. "Captain, this don't look like the group we're tracking. No stolen horses, no weapons except that old rifle." Harlan ignored him, his attention fixed on Clara. "Miss Wilson, your reputation in Willow Creek is my concern, not yours," she interrupted firmly. "My father fought alongside you in Mexico, Captain. He trusts my judgment." Dakota remained absolutely still, knowing that any movement might be interpreted as aggression. The tension stretched between them like a taut bowstring, ready to snap at the slightest provocation. Finally, Harlan spat on the ground. "You're making a mistake, girl. These savages can't be civilized or trusted." He turned his cold gaze to Dakota. "I've got my eye on you, Comanche. One wrong move and it'll be your last." "We're losing the trail, Captain," another Ranger reminded him. "Those raiders are headed toward the Brazos." With a last venomous glance, Harlan remounted. "We'll continue this conversation another time, Miss Wilson. I'll be speaking to your father." After the Rangers galloped away, Clara's composure finally cracked. She sat heavily on the blanket, her hands trembling slightly. "I thought he might. I wasn't sure what he would do." Dakota crouched beside her. "That was brave but dangerous." Harland is not a man to challenge lightly. I couldn't let him threaten you, she said simply, looking up to meet his eyes. Not when you've done nothing wrong. From the trees came a small voice. Father, can we come out now? Dakota called his sons to them, gathering both boys in his arms when they ran to him. You did well to stay hidden, he praised them. Clara watched the reunion with glistening eyes. What will you do now? Harland won't forget this. We must return to our people, Dakota said, the decision crystallizing in his mind. It is no longer safe for us here. When? Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Now, today. He looked at her steadily. The Rangers will return to Willow Creek. I cannot risk my sons. Clara nodded, understanding despite the pain evident in her expression. Will I ever see you again? Instead of answering directly, Dakota reached inside his shirt and removed a small pouch. From it, he took an intricately carved stone pendant, an eagle in flight, suspended on a leather cord. This belonged to my wife, he said, holding it out to Clara. It symbolizes freedom and the connection between earth and sky, between different worlds. I can't accept this, Clara protested, though her fingers reached for it involuntarily. In our way, gifts carry meaning beyond the object itself, Dakota explained. This says what I cannot say with words. As Clara accepted the pendant, their fingers touched briefly. In that moment of connection, something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of possibilities in a different world, a different time. The frontier is changing, Clara said softly. More settlers come, but also more understanding. Perhaps someday, perhaps, Dakota agreed, though they both recognized the slenderness of that hope. My people speak of seasons in the life of man. This has been an unexpected season. They packed the remains of the picnic in silence. As Dakota prepared the horses for departure, Clara knelt to speak with his sons. Remember what I taught you, she told them, and know that there are always friends to be found, even in unexpected places. The boys hugged her with unrestrained affection, bringing tears to her eyes. Dakota watched, memorizing the image of this woman who had shown his children that kindness could cross the boundaries between their worlds. As they mounted to leave, Clara stood beneath the great oak, the pendant gleaming against her dress. The Comanche believe in spirits that guide our paths, Dakota said. Perhaps they guided me to Willow Creek for a purpose beyond trading. I believe they did, Clara replied, a smile breaking through her tears. Safe journey, Dakota. Teach your sons that not all settlers carry hatred in their hearts. And I will remember, he promised, that courage and understanding can be found where least expected. With a final nod, Dakota turned his horse, leading his sons away from the oak tree, and the woman who had briefly illuminated a different possibility for their future. They rode toward the western horizon, where the lands of the Comanche still offered refuge. Behind them, Clara remained watching until they disappeared from sight, the eagle pendant held tightly in her hand, a symbol of connection between worlds that, despite all odds, had briefly touched. 3 months later, as autumn painted the plains in russet and gold, a letter arrived at the trading post nearest the Comanche winter grounds. It was addressed simply to Dakota, and contained news that James Wilson had become an advocate for fair treatment of peaceful native tribes, inspired by the courage of a Comanche warrior who had chosen diplomacy over conflict. The letter ended with a simple promise. The oak at Beaver Creek still stands. Some friendships, like some spirits, transcend the boundaries we create. Until our paths cross again, Clara. Dakota carefully folded the letter, tucking it alongside the small portrait of his late wife. 2 women from different worlds, both teaching him that courage took many forms. As he watched his sons playing with the other children of the tribe, he allowed himself to hope that perhaps they would live to see a time when the boundaries between worlds might grow less formidable than they now appeared.